say na 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 na. I say na 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 na. Say na 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 na. I 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 say na na na. I say na 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 na. I never had it easy. For the brands and the bling and the expensive thing, oh, I never had the money, never had nice living. And mama say, oh, you could have it all, just work hard for yours. I say, mama, you know, I work hard for sure. Now Jaja bless me with the opportunity to fly country to country. Now I could drink champagne when I thirst. Now I could see only thing I never see. They say this hour you done so long. But I thank me for the run the family. No bad mind boy, they can stop me. And every show I smiling, cause trust me, life is so lovely. Whoa. And I'm far from finished. Whoa. And I can't believe it. No. See, I'm far from finished.
The Caribbean American Cultural Arts Foundation is a national organization based in Atlanta, Georgia. Founded in 2016, we are dedicated to the development of cultural arts and educational mentorship programs. We're committed to our community and focused on the study of advancement and the presentation of Caribbean arts, humanities, and most importantly, our culture. We're a teaching organization with a strong belief in passing down knowledge and information to the next generation of cultural leaders. We currently host collegiate, mentorship, and career placement programs to assist young millennials. The Caribbean American Cultural Arts Foundation mission is to support exceptional educational programs and services for the next generation of cultural leaders by providing funding to programs that promote cultural leadership through mentoring, career advancement, and artistic development. For more information, visit www.caribbeanculturalarts.org. Leadership, community, culture. The Caribbean American Cultural Arts Foundation.
Look out, world, here we come, up and running. Comfort comes from knowing that people have made the same journey, and solace comes from understanding how others have learned to sing again. Helen Steiner Rice. Poet Helen Steiner Rice understood something very equalizing about the human condition. She knew that no matter what we endure in humanity, others have lived a similar experience, and there is a comfort that comes in knowing that one day joy will return. Right now, the challenges and loss that we have collectively experienced from COVID-19 may lead us to forget our ability to be resilient and realize that we will move beyond this one day. That is why the Caribbean American Cultural Arts Foundation created the Solace virtual series and outreach campaign. Our goal was simply to engage, inform, and inspire people forward. We wanted to bring artists and art to the forefront as a resource to help us collectively move beyond COVID-19. This is the first time in modern history that the world has been left at a standstill, undone and uncertain. We wanted Solace to bring comfort to the community and bring hope by reminding you that one day we will sing and celebrate together again. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. On behalf of Chairman Michael Thomas, the board and staff at CACAF, welcome to Solace.
Welcome back to another episode of Solace Virtual Series, brought to you by the Caribbean American Cultural Arts Foundation. Thank you for joining us once again. Our series is here to engage, inform, and most importantly, celebrate the artistic talents and also the information provided to you, the viewers. Caribbean American Cultural Arts Foundation is dedicated to leadership, community, and most importantly, culture. Solace Virtual Series dedicates its time to sharing information while featuring applied and also musical artists. On behalf of the Caribbean American Cultural Arts Foundation, welcome to another episode of Solace Virtual Series.
Good afternoon. My name is Brittany Wyatt, and I'm the Senior Regional Marketing Manager for the Southeast region at Allstate Insurance Company. I have the pleasure of introducing a friend and advocate who will be your host in tonight's discussion about the current happenings all around us. Ivan Shamas is the General Manager of Telemundo Atlanta and also a community leader in all that he does. I was proud to serve with him as he chaired the Young Professional Leaders Advisory Board for the United Way of Greater Atlanta. In 2020, he was named one of Georgia Trend's 100 most influential Georgians on a list that included the mayor of Atlanta, Tyler Perry, as well as Sarah Blakely of Spanx. He is an active board member of the Atlanta Community Food Bank, also the United Way of Greater Atlanta, as well as the chair of the board for the Georgia Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. Ivan is always a good representative of not just his community, but of all that is right in diversity and equality. I'm proud to call him an amigo and want to say that you're in good hands with him as your host today. Wishing Ivan and all the panelists all the best in this discussion.
Thank you for joining us today. As you heard, my name is Ivan Shamas, and I am honored to be part of this and moderating this panel. I first want to thank the Caribbean American Cultural Arts Foundation for putting this relevant and needed conversations to get together and for having the courage to host these types of panel discussions. I want to thank my friend for actually that kind introduction, and I think this is going to be proactive. I think it's going to be productive. I think it's going to be healthy. And I think what we're wanting to get out of this is basically a state of what's going on around us right now, and also what we can possibly do as individuals to help make the world we're living in a better place. So as we begin this Saturday, we recall the optimism of Nelson Mandela, and of course, Martin Luther King Jr. and others, and Gandhi. It was Martin Luther King Jr. who talked about injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So we want this to be the theme of our conversation. And it's within this spirit that we hope to illuminate a way to move forward with a constructive conversation of healing, one of comfort and one of hope for all of us and all those that get to tune in to this. Before we start, I'd like to introduce a special guest. He's an attorney. His name is Mawali Davis, and he is a partner with the Davis Bozeman law firm. And he's a civil attorney, but a criminal defense as well, and does trials. He is going to give us a little understanding of what's been happening on the ground, particularly here in Atlanta, as he is representing two of the college students that we have been watching on television over the past few nights, one from Spelman, one from Morehouse, and the situation that has unfolded before our eyes. So I'm going to pass it on to Mawali, and thank you for representing our community, and tell us a little bit about what's been happening right now as you see it.
Thank you so much. This is an incredibly exciting time. It is a time of great pain, but it is also a time of great possibility. And what we've seen on the ground with our young people who have been engaging in protest is their resilient and continual spirit of fighting for justice, and people just have had enough as it relates to the police brutality, racially motivated attacks. And unfortunately, a Morehouse student, Messiah Young, who I represent, and then Tanaya Pilgrim, who a good friend of mine, Chris Stewart, represents, were caught up on Saturday just really trying to travel home. And there was a curfew there. Their Morehouse brother attempted to speak to them and was tackled by the police. When they saw that, you can, if anyone's watched the video, you can hear him like literally crying and wailing in the background. And you can hear Messiah begging them to just let him go, let him get in the car. He hadn't done anything but speak to the two of them. Unfortunately, that turned the attention on Messiah and Tanaya, and the police swarmed their car, smashed out their windows, and began to tase them. And it is a very horrific experience that they went through. So we are representing them. Beautiful young people. They are very intelligent. Morehouse, Spelman, great families. And it again illustrates the issue around police brutality, that anyone, and no one is immune to it, and anyone can be susceptible to police brutality. Here's what happened. And I just think that it's important to underscore the power of the people who have been in the street. And I know there has been a real mixed review as to what they've been doing. I'll tell you what they've done. Because they've been in the street, you now have 4 officers who've been charged in Minneapolis, Minnesota, because those young people have stayed in the street. It would not have happened. Trust me, I've been doing civil rights law for over a decade, and the charging of law enforcement officers is still very rare. In Atlanta, 2 of the officers were fired within 24 hours of the assault. 6 of the officers have been charged with a crime, and yesterday they turned themselves in, charged with aggravated assault and other crimes. So this is unprecedented, and this is a result of the atmosphere these young people who remain in the street have created. And whether people like it, if they think it's undignified or not, the reality is that they have delivered results that we have not received or seen in my career. And I know prior to my practicing in the history of our people. So this is important. And it's important that we pay attention. Just to give a little bit of an international flavor, we have also seen solidarity protests around the world. So you've seen young people all around the world standing up in solidarity because of the atrocity that they have seen in the George Floyd death and the Ahmaud Arbery death. And this is a time that I think we should lean in very closely, because I believe that this is a birth of a movement and not just a moment.
Well said, and thank you, Mr. Davis, for giving an insight on that story as we've seen unfolded. And if I had to ask you one final question, I mean, what is the resolution to this call of justice that we have been seeing? And I feel like it's almost led by a younger generation that you've talked about.
Yeah.
What is what can be the resolution?
You know, what we're encouraging young people to do, those of us who are have a little gray in their hair now, we're encouraging the young people to get together and begin consolidating demands, of course, with the assistance of what we would consider our elders or wise counsel. They are what they know. And I think it's important. What they know in what they have been crying out is that we are done dying. That's the rally cry. We are done dying and stop killing us. And so how do you create a system that stops from doing what it has been doing for hundreds of years is to really get at the core of the issue. And at the core of it is institutional racism and white supremacy. And that is it's a tough, messy work. But we believe that if these young people get together and continue to discuss after they protest in the evenings after curfew and continue to discuss it with the assistance of some help from some of the elders, they'll get their demands together. But we just have to give them time. And I think, you know, justice and this kind of organizing just doesn't happen with the snap of the fingers. And so we have to trust the process and trust their natural urge towards justice. They're just leaning and moving towards justice because that's what resonates in all of our hearts and spirits, and they have not been corrupted, and it allows them to move in the right direction regardless of what their tactics have been.
Excellent. Okay, well, thank you for sharing that. I think that, as you mentioned, justice takes time. And one of the positive things that we're seeing is the solidarity, as you also mentioned, of people coming together.
Absolutely.
And this is enough. Mr. Mawali Davis of the law firm Davis Bozeman, thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Thank you. I love the forum, and just best wishes to everyone, and everybody stay safe, and let's stay encouraged. Keep believing in our young people.
Thank you for saying. Wonderful. Well, thank you again, Mr. Davis. And this is a nice transition to our star panel and the ones that are going to lead this conversation with us today. Let's first bring in a gentleman who is the president of the Georgia Haitian American Chamber of Commerce and an Atlanta-based executive coach. He also runs a company called QM3, a company called Execufit, which is a consulting agency, if you will. And I'd like to introduce our first panelist, Surel Keton.
Welcome. Good evening, everyone. It's great to be here, great to be among you other panelists. I cannot wait to dig into this conversation. A special thanks to the Caribbean Cultural Arts Foundation for creating the venue for this conversation to happen. It is really an important conversation, the kind of conversation that gets to raise not just our consciousness as panelists, but the consciousness of the world. Thank you for having me here. It's great to be here.
Wonderful. Welcome. Thank you for being here with us. Wonderful. Moving on to an attorney. She's a managing partner of Scott and Turner Law. Her name is Jewel Scott. She has served as the former honorary consul of Jamaica here in Atlanta. She was the first Black female district attorney in Clayton County, where she's currently vying for Supreme Court judge. So I want to welcome Jewel Scott. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me. I am delighted to be a part of the program and to be among distinguished panelists. And I look forward to the conversation this evening rather.
Excellent. We're grateful that you're here with us. Excellent. Transitioning onto a physician, board certified, medical director of emergency medicine at Piedmont Newton Hospital in Covington, Georgia. A rising voice in the fight against misinformation around COVID is what we've been seeing. So she's an emergency physician and also a new author of a book about women in medicine. So please welcome Dr. Tamika Blake. Thank you for being here.
It is a pleasure and an honor. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of the conversation.
We are looking forward to diving right into it. And of course, last but not least, we want to welcome a licensed medical health counselor, a clinical director for a company she founded called Revolutionary Change Counseling out of the Tampa Bay area in Florida. Her name is Shauna Wilson. Thank you, Shauna, for being here.
Thank you, Ivan, and thank you to the Caribbean American Cultural Arts Foundation for having this conversation, this much needed conversation today. I think we can all agree that this is definitely a time where us as a people can come together and create change. Revolutionary Change Counseling, we are located in Apollo Beach, and this is a revolutionary time. So I'm hopeful that even despite this circumstance, we can find change and move forward differently.
Excellent. Well, thank you all four of you for joining us today. We're going to have a productive, proactive conversation and keep it real and just put it out there. But I think we should transition or just move on to Shauna. I'm going to actually toss the first question to you. We have seen some powerful images on television over the past week, actually, and a lot has been going on. So please tell us how you're doing, what's your state of mind, and your thoughts on everything as a whole, as a big picture.
Yes, so, this is definitely a really tough time for our nation and for our entire world. This hits close to home for me and my family. I am the mother of a 4-year-old African-American son. I'm married to an African-American male. And so when we see the images of police brutality, we see the violence, we see all of the challenges that affect us mentally and emotionally. It's been a difficult time, but we're standing and we're coming together. And, we're in Tampa Bay. So Tampa Bay has a population of almost 500,000 people, and almost 300,000 are people of color. And so our voices, they matter. Our voices that we are speaking forth in solidarity during this time and wanting to be heard is really important. So we're providing counseling services, we're providing care, working with individuals and families that are needing ways to cope during this, and just taking it day by day.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. I'd like to ask Jewel, Jewel Scott, what recommendations do you have with everything that's been going on for our communities of color? And being a Latino myself, I mean, we're also in many cases affected on various levels, but what is the solution to equity?
And I'd just like to follow up on the previous question. Definitely, as a district attorney in Clayton County, which is a predominantly minority community, I saw firsthand as district attorney how our boys especially, and I'm a mother of 2 young men that I raised in Clayton County, African-American young men, and I too was also married to an African-American male. And I saw it firsthand in terms of the racism and the systematic racism that impacted our young men and sent a lot of them into a prison. Of course, I was a prosecutor and that was my responsibility to prosecute, but it gave me an opportunity to introduce ameliorative measures. And so part of that was actually seeing that our young men needed mentors, solid male mentors, A lot of them, their dads were incarcerated in prison. They were used to doing visitation in prison. And so part of the solution is having strong male mentors mentor our young men, especially those that come from single parent households where moms are trying to raise young men. Part of what I did also was introduce a pretrial diversion program that said if you were a first-time nonviolent felony offender, I'd work you through a program, dismiss the charges, expunge the record, you have a second chance. And so where there's systemic racism that is designed to keep our young African-American males and other minorities incarcerated and stymied, we have to get creative. We have to put those solutions in there to make sure they stay out of jail, they stay out of trouble. And this is a very apt time to continue to have those discussions as to how we can save a lot of them.
Wonderful, Ms. Jewel Scott. Thank you so much. You gave several examples of ideas of what we can do as a community. I love it. Strong male mentors is key. And sometimes it just comes to the basics of that, introducing programs, as you mentioned, and just have the discussion, as you just said, which is what we're doing today. Thank you for that. Mr. Sorel Ketan, I'd like to ask you, we've seen this before. We've seen issues amongst the African-American community when it comes to police brutality. We've witnessed it on television. But after the death of George Floyd, something was different. And I'd like to get your opinion on, has something changed, or what do you feel has shifted this and brought the masses across the country on the streets and everybody in solidarity coming together?
Thank you for the question. And before I answer the question, I want to especially send condolences and love to the family of George Floyd, and also condolences and love to everyone in our community who has suffered as a result of this. So everything we're saying tonight as a panel rests on our love for people, and also rests on our desire to hold everyone, including ourselves, accountable. So, you know, you've seen the Grand Canyon, right? It's amazing. Yet the Grand Canyon was formed one drop of water, one flow of a river over years and years. So when what keeps happening happens over and over, it gets to the point where it's too much. So there's that effect, right? It's too much. So the whole world rises, and I'm grateful for the opportunity that it's too much is creating. And it's the opportunity for all of us, including myself, to see the responsibility that we can take. Dr. Scott and Dr. Blake and the other panelists spoke about what we could do. Now, I want to call to all of the corporate captains, all of the chiefs of institutions. You know, we can talk about this. We can continue to have conversations, or we can each realize that where I am, I have the capability to make a significant difference. And that significant difference goes like this. If I'm the head of a corporation, I'm very clear of the structural, socioeconomic structures that are there that perpetuate inequalities. You know what? I have the responsibility, perhaps at the stroke of a pen, to change policies and to change structures in an organization so that the inequalities that people of color and disadvantaged people suffer disappear. So we want to make it complicated with a lot of conversations. And I'm calling to the people who do have the power. Ivan, you're the head of a TV station, and I'm the head of a company. Many heads of corporations around Atlanta, legislators, governors, you name it. We do know what the structural inconveniences are that keep it together, and we can let it loose. So I'm a partisan of let's stop the talk and let's actually change the policies and the structures that keep the inequalities in place. We can do it, and now's the time.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, Sorrel, and also thank you for, and I know we echo your words about our condolences to the family of George Floyd. So thank you for sharing that too. Great ideas. And I do think, as you mentioned, it's all of our individual responsibilities to step up. Heads of organizations, companies, we can make a change as well, and we can influence it. All of that is great, and we need some action. But we also can't forget that we are in the middle of a pandemic as well. So I want to transition to Dr. Blake and basically ask her thoughts with everything going on around us medically and the safety that we're supposed to maintain. What are some of the concerns as a physician that you might have after seeing the masses come out on the streets and the congregating?
So I am so glad this conversation is happening. You know, I look at the television and I see all the protests, and COVID-19 is still active and real. So it's something that we really need to understand. The virus has not gone anywhere. And when I look at all the news reports, you know, there's no social distancing. And that is a great environment for the virus to be spread. We're still in a pandemic. I've seen, unfortunately, some of our protesters are not wearing masks, and thank God many of them are.
Right.
But it is so key that we understand that we know how the virus is spread, large gatherings. So if we can implement some of the measures that we know can help protect us and still stand for injustice and protest would be awesome. But it is a concern as a physician, and we're in a public health crisis.
Well, I'm glad you're mentioning that, and I think it's very important to bring up, and it's just about the basics. We can be out there, we can be congregating, but it's about just taking care of ourselves as well. And it's good to see when we have the social distancing and the masks. So thanks for the reminder as well, Dr. Blake. It's not just about a pandemic, but I want to take it to Shauna, who can actually talk about the possible mental health implications or effects during this time in our community.
Yeah, there are several implications that happen with our mental health during this time. You know, when we're seeing the protests happening and you see a lot of high emotion or heightened emotion, be it if it's anger, be it if it's frustration, there is this phenomenon called the tip of the iceberg phenomenon. And usually what happens is when someone is in a heightened emotional state, you see the anger, you see maybe some of the frustration happening, but underneath the iceberg of anger, there is other more vulnerable emotions that we're not really talking about. Those emotions are emotions of deep-rooted oppression, feeling helpless or voiceless. And so from a mental health perspective, what happens is we then go into the survival mode, and there are self-protective factors that we as humans begin to function just out of survival. And so understanding and knowing that there are several layers to the emotions that we're seeing is extremely important. Another piece is there is a lot of research that shows increased rates of post-traumatic stress disorder from being directly in a protest setting or just being exposed to what you're seeing on social media. We can all agree that the video that we saw, the tragedy that we saw of George Floyd's death was traumatizing. It was traumatizing for his family to see that. It was traumatizing for the entire world to see that. And so there's been an increased rate of trauma that we all are kind of experiencing together as a people and as a nation. And with that trauma, there's a lot of mixed emotions and distress. One thing that we're definitely encouraging people to really be mindful of is acknowledging your emotions and tending to your emotions throughout this entire process. I know that when we see so many images and we have so much information given to us, it can be like overload for our mind and our emotions. And so one of the ways that we can begin to cope with that is really having a village in our families, having a village in our communities, where I think someone addressed it earlier, that we have elders, people with gray hair that we're connecting ourselves with, so that we are encouraged with our sense of value and self-worth. Right. And being able to stand united, but be mentally and emotionally well during this journey.
Wow. There is so much. I mean, this is a topic in itself when it comes to the emotional or the post-traumatic or the stress or the visuals that we have been seeing. You talked about having a 4-year-old child. I have 3 kids under the age of 8. And this has been, something that they have been seeing on television. So it's a conversational piece. It's a conversation that has to be had within the household. And I definitely want to dive into that because I know several of the panelists have kids, and I want to know how we should be handling that. And I want to come back to that. But Jewel, I know you have children as well that you mentioned. And I'd like to get your take on it as far as their perspective, and also what their thought is on what's been happening, basically.
Right. So mine are not children; they're actually young men.
Okay.
And so we have very lively discussions because, as African American young men, they've lived some of these experiences because they've had their fair share of profiling or interaction with officers as well. And so, they've had friends also that have interactions with police officers. So they've learned how to be cordial when stopped, how to answer police officers, and how to minimize any negative impact that could possibly occur from these interactions with police officers. And so our discussions pretty much, it's distressing that they're profiled. It's distressing that there's a systemic racism.
Wow.
But this is why we're having this discussion this evening as to how do we handle this? How do we equip our children to handle these incidences? And it's great that now the wider community is now engaged in the discussion, because previously it would be just our voices. And there's this term, the invisibilization of our community. Well, we're no longer invisible. And the wider community is now listening and hearing our voices. And so I think just talking with our children about the real world and equipping them if they're ever going to have an interaction with police officers. But on the other hand, officers, I think, now are being made aware of their impact on our communities and how they actually need to adjust and change their policies and their procedures so that they're more humane and their interactions with us are far more humane. And I also wanted to include the condolences to Ahmed Arbery's family as well, because that was just as tragic as seeing what occurred with George Floyd. And so this is a great atmosphere for us to transition and have a more humane society that oppresses us less.
Jewel, thank you for that. That was a very rich answer on so many levels. One of the things that you highlighted, and I think it's important just to bring up again, is that when you talked about your boys and what you had to talk to them and guide them through in their life and what it would be like to be in the shoes of an African American in different situations, I think much of the world does not know about that conversation. And I have heard it for many years, and I am glad you brought it up because it's worth bringing up again. I do want to ask you a question as an attorney with everything that's going on in Atlanta. Basically, the arrest, the looting, the property destruction. What will this group be facing, or whoever does this? What will they be facing in courts? Because I know it's affecting international students as well.
Right. So, you saw just yesterday, I think, the police officers that were involved in tasing students, that there was, the district attorney of Fulton County was able to get charges without even presenting it to a grand jury. Typically, you don't get an indictment unless you present it to a grand jury, but he was able to bypass that process and have them arrested. Those that are protesting and looting and destroying property, of course, there would be charges for destruction of property. There may be charges of obstruction of police officers, disorderly conduct. Some of it might be burglary, where they break into stores, etc. So those are some of the charges. Aggravated assaults, if it's considered that there's any weaponry involved, even the use of a car with respect to coming at police officers, you could be looking at aggravated assault charges. So there are a range of, some of them misdemeanor charges, some of them felony charges. My understanding with the charges against the police officers, those are felony charges, which are the more serious charges.
Wow. So the courts are going to be busy basically right now with everything that's happening.
Well, the courts are going to be overwhelmed. Remember, we're still in a pandemic, right? And so the Supreme Court of Georgia had a stay on everything, since March. So the courts have not been operating at full speed since March.
Wow, good point.
Yeah.
On top of it all.
Right. So June 12th is when that order will be lifted. So you're looking at a backlog. Honestly, I don't know when they'll be able to catch up. And then with all of these new charges, because this is not your normal situation, this is several arrests every day. So I cannot conceptualize how our courts are going to catch up with everything. And it's not like just bringing in judges, because that costs. And we're in an economic slump at this time. So
there's nothing normal about this. There's nothing. So it's something new for all of us, and what we're seeing unfold is extremely different and new. But we'll go with it just as we did as a society with COVID as well. And Sorrel, I want to get your perspective, and I think you have a unique one, but when it comes to the complicated relationship between law enforcement and the public, what are your thoughts on that?
I am very hopeful, Ivan, and I'm hopeful in this sense that the honorable men and women who take the oath of office and being police officers actually do take an oath. Like, they have an agreement they make, and they have a monopoly on force and violence to protect us and protect the common good. And we have given them that responsibility, and we give them that responsibility, and in return, they take an oath. And as crazy as it may sound, perhaps what the protesters are doing in the street is demanding a return to that oath, a return to the integrity, the responsibility, and the accountability that comes with that. And just to remind everyone, because this is our agreement, I read the oath that a police officer takes. On my honor, I will never betray my badge, my integrity, my character, or public trust. I will always have the courage to hold myself and others accountable for our actions. I will always uphold the Constitution, my community, and the agency I serve. So I call it the forgotten agreement. And I'm calling on all of us to remember this agreement. If you're out in the streets protesting,
right,
be demanding a return to the agreement. If you are a police officer, those of you honoring the agreement, thank you. Those of you who are not, I'm demanding that you do. And it sounds simple, yet it could be that easy. I'm calling for a return to the agreement.
I love it. Okay, great. We're going to add that to our list of being proactive. Thank you for putting that out in the universe as well, and just reiterating what an oath is. Is this something that a police officer would take, or anybody in law enforcement in general?
I actually did download it from several police departments. Okay. This happened to be the one from one of our cities.
Okay, wonderful.
So it's there.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you. So, and sometimes we just need a reminder, and we need to put it out there. Sorrel, you're the president of the Georgian Haitian Chamber of Commerce. I'd love to ask your perspective on race amongst the Caribbean folk. How do Caribbean people see race?
As a people of African descent, we suffer in the same way that everyone does. And we are standing with our brothers and sisters in the African diaspora, and we are demanding the same thing they're demanding. We call, as a Caribbean group, not for an eye for an eye. We're not looking to hate or blame those who have perpetrated acts of injustices. We're rather demanding that we be afforded the rights that every human being deserves. So I'm proud to stand with my fellow Caribbeans in this stand that will keep until the return to the agreement is achieved.
Wonderful. Well said. Thank you for sharing that with us. I want to take it back to Shauna, and we want to talk about racism amongst the minority group, and whether you're Caribbean or from any part of the world as an immigrant community, what are some of the harmful, if they are different, psychological effects that they would have on a minority or an immigrant, if you will?
Yes, Ivan, that's a great question. I am Caribbean American, so my parents are Jamaican born. My father still lives in Jamaica. My family has been in the United States. But with that, there has been psychological impacts of coming from your homeland country to America. And so some of the challenges that you see include discrimination, not being able to have the same opportunities as non-people of color do in this country. So being able to not being able to be put in positions of power or positions of control has definitely been a struggle. I always like to use the analogy that immigrants from other countries, it's almost like being replanted in new soil, right? So when you come to the United States, maybe your soil was soil from the Caribbean and it's soil for an apple tree, but now you're being planted into soil in Florida, which is an orange tree. And so that adjustment of assimilating mentally and emotionally sometimes has its challenges.
I love it, and you make a great point. And I think about my parents who've come overseas as well, and the other obstacles or layers that you may that their viewpoint or that they have to overcome. And you just mentioned it. Some of us as minorities are not in these positions of power as well to influence and make a difference. So I think there's so many aspects to it. When it comes to racism, I do want to bring it back to you about our children. And I know you have a little one. And how do you talk to children right now about what's happening, the protests and the issues?
Yes, that's a great question. I know most parents right now, they're asking this question. How do I begin to even have this conversation? One thing that I've encouraged parents of younger children is to really start simple. There are biases scientifically that show that infants as young as 6 to 8 months old can identify color. But the stereotypes with those biases are developed and taught over time. And so any opportunity that you have to allow for a teachable moment for children of color to embrace and love the skin that they're in, and to be aware that we're all created equally and we all should be treated equally. That's a dialogue I have with my son at the age of 4 years old. And so, of course, as we know, as children get older, the conversation is a bit more complex because they're a bit more aware, they can see some of the things happening. But being honest and having open dialogue based on their level of understanding and the questions that they have is a good way to start those conversations as a parent.
Okay, wonderful. Good point, and we're going to add that to our list. So thank you for that. Let's take it to Dr. Blake. We're talking about our minority group. We're talking about, in your case, COVID amongst the African American community, amongst Hispanics. We have been disproportionately affected by this virus. But what inequities do you see in healthcare? What are some of the imbalances? What are some of the solutions when it comes to being a minority and our access, or what we should be doing, or what have you seen?
So I think that's such an important topic. So we have seen Black and Brown communities have been disproportionately affected by COVID-19. So now is the time. Knowledge is power. So really empowering the community to know what to look for. There's so much unknown. We don't know a lot about this virus. We're all still learning. So we have seen that they delay care. Our communities wait to the very end. And if you wait to the point where you're struggling to breathe, there's a large population that may end up on a breathing machine. And we know that the mortality rate is higher if you end up on a ventilator. So we do not have the luxury to wait. We have to know the symptoms, shortness of breath. You have to seek treatment. So it's so key that in order to change some of those disparities, we have to get that information to the community.
Information is key. We just have to educate our community, and we're seeing it as well heavy in the Hispanic community, because many that are being admitted right now are Latinos for various reasons. But like you mentioned, it's about education. It's about just getting the information out there so that we can understand what's happening. I do want to ask, let's take it back to Sorel, if you will. Cultures make a difference. How can other cultures make a difference in their homes, in their workplaces, in society? I know you spoke so eloquently about, you touched on this earlier, when it comes to injustice and discrimination. So I know it's a broad question, but basically, how can different cultures make a difference?
Yes, thank you for the question. It's really close to my heart. Being from Haiti, being of African descent, I have personally struggled with being separate and not seeing myself as separate and different. So what I have been grappling with and creating for myself and my family, and I want to offer to the world, it's not like the answer, but maybe it's a different way of looking at it. Maybe we're not so different and so separate after all. So I've been toying with this idea of the power of the collective, that I am a member of the collective, and everything that I've been struggling for, fighting for, working really hard to get, maybe I can just get by going to the collective. So different cultures could start adopting an idea, maybe morph it a little bit. Well, you know, Ivan, we're not so different. And what you need, maybe I have. And what you need, Joel, maybe Dr. Blake has. And so other cultures can literally play the game of assimilating, just like you were saying, Shauna, transplant yourself into the soil of a Black woman. Transplant yourself into the soil of an Irishman. Transplant yourself and work to learn about the impact of injustice on another and feel the pain of another. Make it your pain, and then whatever response you would deliver for yourself to alleviate the pain, then deliver that as a member of the collective.
Well said. Thank you very much. Let's play off of that, and I want to open this question up to anyone in the panel that wants to take a stab at it. But what we're continuing to see in Atlanta and across the countries is the heavy protest. And so what message would you have? What nugget might you have for these young people who want to see a significant change and find solace at this time? What can we tell them? What can we tell them to comfort them? What can we tell them about what they should be doing? One nugget maybe from whoever wants to just take a stab at it.
I will just add from the public health emergency crisis in regards to COVID-19. Just remember, we all stand for justice, and we standing with us as a community, but remember to be safe. But I know that the younger community feel that they may be invincible when it comes to the virus. We're asking, please wear your mask, social distance when you can. And I believe, because we're fighting COVID and racism. COVID has not gone away.
Thank you for that reminder. Anyone else, when it comes to our young group that's out there who want to see a significant change? I'm going to go to Jewel if that's okay, because I know she talks about her young boys and how they've become superstars.
I guess I would endorse what Dr. Blake has said, that we have to practice social distancing, wear our masks, but I am very encouraging of our youth. I think if we can recall when we were young people, that we often were the ones that were protesting causes. And so it's the energy of the youth, of the young people that really bring about change. In my time, it was ended apartheid in South Africa, and we galvanized behind that and eventually saw the change. And so there's a place for the energy and the synchrony with our young people. I encourage them to keep protesting, of course, not to destroy properties or to loot, but their voices will be heard. We will no longer be invisible to the powers that be, and keep doing it until we see meaningful change, because now the authorities are listening. Now the police departments are looking at their policies and procedures and trying to make changes to make sure that they act in a more humane way when they come into contact with us. So I applaud all the efforts all over the world, because we know it's not just Atlanta, Boston, Washington, it's all across the world at this point.
I love it. Okay, then let's continue with that. And I'm going to take it to Shauna and just basically say, as Jewel just mentioned, what would be your advice when it comes to promoting peace amongst your neighbor?
Yes, that's a great question. There's so much conversation and dialogue happening. I know that there are so many questions that people of color want answered. And there's so many questions that non-Blacks, they don't really know and they don't really understand. And so one way that can really bring peace is having conversations where people that feel like they've not been heard are being heard and they're being validated. And if you do not understand, to try to bridge the gap and try to understand. So bringing peace does not have to be a complicated thing. It can start really, really simple. Listening and being heard and speaking out and trying to understand.
I love it. Okay, wonderful, great. Well, then we're going to conclude this. I am going to take it to Sorrel for one more question about your vision, and anyone is welcome to interject as well. But your vision on equity and justice, and what would be an ideal world?
An ideal world started as something concrete and is still going on in Atlanta. So I'm proud to be an Atlantan and proud to have been a part and continue to be a part of an initiative called the Atlanta Friendship Initiative.
Okay.
That initiative was started by a friend of mine, two friends of mine, Bill Nordmark and John Grant. And the initiative was simple. Let's take two heads of corporations, one who's Caucasian and one who's of color, brown or black or yellow, and let's pair them together. And let's have them befriend one another. They meet on a quarterly basis and they get their families together for dinner twice a year. So as a grand vision, it's like the world could be like that. And that group of friends, over 174 pairs, were brought together to literally create that the people of influence in Atlanta would actually enact the changes in the structures and corporations, the changes in the structures and institutions to eliminate inequalities and injustice. So that's my vision, that the Atlanta Friendship Initiative spreads to the world, that corporations across the world and institutions across the world adopt the approach of taking the responsibility of saying, you know what, we're in a position to make a difference by changing policies and creating structures that work. And we are going to do that.
I love it. It's about changing policies and creating structure.
Can I take a stab at it?
Yes, ma'am. Please, Jewel. Thank you.
I would love to see us return to the concept of it takes a village to raise the children, where we're so invested in our children. My ideal would be to empty our jails of the population of Hispanics and African American men, and having their families, their girlfriends, wives, their children come to the jail to visit them as if that is normal. So my ideal is that where we return to being communities where, even though it may not be my child, I'm adopting the children in my neighborhood to ensure that we're propelling them in the right direction, that we're protecting them from negative interactions with police officers, that they end up in jail and they're stymied because they have felony records and they can't go anywhere. And so my ideal is the return to it takes a village to raise the children, because we're so vested in them succeeding and getting where they need to in life.
I love it. Well said. And we've been hearing that a lot lately. So thank you for reiterating that. And it does take a village no matter what community you're with. I'm so happy that we've had this productive conversation. I actually took some notes about some proactive things that we can be doing individually, as a community, as a group, as a country. I'm just going to reiterate some of the things that this star panel of 4 actually mentioned. Strong male mentors, introduce programs like pretrial or second chance programs, have discussions. It's about love for the people, we need to remember. Hold ourselves accountable. It's our responsibility. As the head of an organization, we can make a change. Change the policies. Stay safe. We are still dealing with COVID. Thank you for that reminder. Acknowledging and tending to your emotions in this time. Lean on your village, in your families and communities. Talk with our children about what's happening. Have open dialogue with our children. Knowledge is power. Educate ourselves on these issues as well as the pandemic that we're living through right now. Information is gold. The power of the collective. Find that commonality. Stand for justice while we be safe. It takes a village. Close communities will help protect and grow our children. You guys have been amazing. I think that the world needs to hear this, because these are nuggets that we can all put into action right now. So I want to thank our 4 panelists. I want to thank Sorel Ketan, who's the president of the Georgia Haitian American Chamber of Commerce. We want to thank Dr. Tamika Blake, who's an emergency physician at Piedmont Newton Hospital, Attorney Jewel Scott with the Scott Turner Law Firm, and Shauna Wilson with Revolutionary Change Counseling. You guys have made a difference in this hour, and I hope that this message gets shared so we can take this and all come together and make a change in our communities, our city, and our country. So thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you.
I'm gonna connect with you guys on LinkedIn. I honestly, hearing y'all speak, I wish I could be personal friends with each of you. I want my children to be able to hang around your children. So I am gonna look you up, and I'm gonna offer an open invite. Look me up or call me anytime if there's anything I can support any of you on. But I was honored to do this, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Evan. Nice meeting everyone.
Excellent. Before we go, we'd like to leave you with a special presentation from Wadadley Strings, as well as some clips from Solace on the Ground, which is supported by Tasa Roti Shop. So we want to say thank you to our sponsors. Thank you to those that participated into this conversation and made it more a cultural experience and a rich conversation.
There was good and evil. We chose good. Why waste the time of the Most High, the sons of men? The rich man's wealth is in the city. Yeah. Instruction of the poor is his poverty. Lord, instruction of
This again has been a presentation and performance by With Daddy Strings. I encourage everyone to follow me at With Daddy Strings. That is WADADLI Strings. You can follow me on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. And I really do appreciate all of the support. Thank you again to the Caribbean American Cultural Arts Foundation for all of the great work we're doing. And I hope to see you guys again soon.
Hey, hey, start it now. Hey, allow we do it now. Step forward, I move forward. I step forward. Everybody, alle, 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 alle. It's time to get up and start moving. Alle, 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 alle. Leaving all your problems behind it. Alle, 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 alle. We pressing on to our victory. Alle, 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 alle. Oh, yeah. I woke up this morning and I feeling nice, but the path that I chose comes with battles to fight. As long as I'm living, my future is shaping, and where I am heading, got no time for problems. All the weight on your shoulder, that's it all. Put the problems behind you, that's it all. If you fall down, just get up and that's it all. Get your head out the dirt and that's it all. When they try to find you, rush it all. And they talking behind you, rush it all. Don't let a thing bother you, rush it all. Put your hand in the air and everybody, alle, 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 alle. It's time to get up and start moving. Alle, 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 alle. Leaving all your problems behind it. Alle, 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 alle. We pressing on to our victory. Alle, 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 alle. Oh, yeah. There we go. Step forward. I move forward. Step forward. I move forward.
Thank you for joining us for this special episode of Solace Virtual Series. On behalf of the Caribbean American Cultural Arts Foundation, we say stay safe, stay home, and enjoy your solace.
Let me start that one here. Like how Martin Luther King would have started. My dream, my dream, my dream, my dream, my dream. Tell you my dream is to live my dream. Hear the most I in me sleep when me sleep. Tell you my goal, my goal, my goal. All of my goal is to reach my goal. Live a happy life, put it on me headstone. Nobody no fi cry over me dead. Look at me now, where them treat me less than gold. Put me in a box like a rectangle. Oh oh, look at me now. Oh, look at me now. Oh, look at me now. I me just tell you my life, where them used to go round me, go round. No one used to come round me. My life was so lonely. Look at me now. Look at me now. Look at me now. Me a take plane like JUTC. When you see me, it's on TV. Shows after shows after shows after shows. Tours after tours after tours.